5 more comic prototype characters. Let's talk about it. Alright, a couple months ago, I did a spec talk where I talked about a couple of prototypes of characters. Basically, if you don't know, comic book prototypes are, maybe a couple months, maybe some years prior to a character's first appearance. There's a similar character, often by same creators or under the same umbrella of a company. And, for the example I gave last time was, there's an issue of Challenges of Unknown. I believe it's number 3. I have it. And it's done by Jack Kirby. And these 4 astronauts to go up in space to get ready to come down. And they have very similar powers to the Fantastic Four. And I think a year later, maybe a little bit longer, maybe less, I can't remember. Jack Kirby goes over to Marvel and makes FF and debuts FF number 1 alongside Stan Lee. Although the FF's more of a Jack Kirby creation, considered he has the prototype, and then also I believe Ben is named after his father, and Susan Storm is named after his daughter, if I remember correctly. That's mostly a Stan Lee or a Jack Kirby creation. Let's jump into the. I figured the last video did pretty decent, and I've got a bunch of these. And I like the prototypes. They're kind of cool, especially for bigger characters where you may not be able to afford their first appearance. It's just kind of cool. It's a nice novelty to look for the prototypes of these characters. A little bit of comic book history. So the first one I'm going to talk about here is Black Hawk number 117. First appearance of the Fantastic Mr. Freeze. Now this is a cool book. It came out in October of 1957 by Dick Dillon and Jack Schreif. I believe is how you say his last name. Jack Schreif. And, of course, a little bit later on in February of 59. So that's a bit of a jump from October 57 to February 59. Batman 121 would come out, and it would be the first appearance of Mr. Zero. That was done by Bill Finger and Sheldon Moldiff. So, different creators, same company umbrella, very similar characters. I mean, one's called Mr. Freeze, shoots things with a freeze gun. One's called Mr. Freeze and shoots things with a freeze gun. They're all just a little bit different. Actually, the Fantastic Mr. Freeze is a robot or a droid or something along those lines that was created by mad scientists. And is defeated by the challenges of the Black Hawk team, and they kind of move on. And he's like a one-off. And of course, also in Detective 373, famously, Mr. Zero would become Mr. Freeze. And then, but when it comes out of Black Hawk 117, you can catch a cheap auction every once in a while. It's one to keep an eye out for Raw, I think. But the highest count in the census, the most amount of copies for this book in one grade would be at a 4.0. So with the most common graded 4.0, if the GPA is only 130 on this, which is a lot cheaper than a 4.0 of a Batman 121, that's for sure. So that's just a neat book, and I think it's just kind of a cool novelty to pick up if you see it, in the bins or whatever. And then, so it's one of those, Batman Rogues are always expensive. Cool book. Now on to the next one. The second one is actually Doctor Strange. Journey to Mystery number 78 would debut in March of 1962, done by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. And it'd be the first appearance of the Sorcerer, who's basically a sorcerer. He's not the Sorcerer Supreme, but yeah, it's a one-off story. And also, a lot of people talk about in Tales of Suspense 32, the first appearance of Sorcerer Sazik, but that came out August of 62. Strange Tales 110, which is famously known as Doctor Strange's first appearance, came out in July of 62. So it's got to be by month. Future me here. I just got done editing the video almost, and I realized that my information was wrong here. This is what I get for not double checking my sources, because while I'm watching when I'm editing the video, I was kind of thinking that doesn't sound right. And I did double check my sources, and of course the Tales of Suspense, what's it 32 or 22 or something like that. The Beehive first Sorcerer Sazik does predate Strange Tales 110, which doesn't come out until July of 63, not 62 like I thought it did. So I will say I was wrong there, and I do want to come back and correct that. And possibly if I do another Spec Talk video on the prototypes, I might return to Sorcerer Sazik. But enjoy the rest of the video. So the Tales Spence is not a prototype, but the Journey Mystery 78 you could argue is a prototype piece. It's first person sorcerer. It came out in March of '62, and Strange Tales 1 came out in July. It was first person Doctor Strange, Wong, Nightmare, the Ancient One, and well, cameo Nightmare really. But that book would be done by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. So one is Stan Lee and Jack Kirby, one Stan Lee and Steve Ditko. But again, it's still all under the Marvel umbrella, and it still has Stan Lee working on both of them. And so the Journey to Mystery is about $100 raw if you look on eBay. Seems to be where they've been landing recently. And it's one where maybe everyone's got their a couple. If you have a couple LCSs in your area, some stores focus more on older books than others, and some stores more modern books. But if you go to you're probably an older guy running the store, and he's probably has some of the old books. You might have a Journey to Mystery laying around, maybe some run fillers, and this is a cool book to keep an eye out for. The CGC most common graded point would be a 7.5 actually, which I just think that means that not a lot of these have been. I don't remember what the exact census count was on this, but I don't think there's a lot of these in the census at all. And I think guys are only sending really nice copies. So the highest graded highest amount of grades are all at a 7.5, and the GPA on that was back in 2021 at $500. So it's in the peak. $500. It's a lot of money for a kind of a novelty book, but it's still a cool thing to keep an eye out for. And again, if you find it for I'm not saying go buy it for $100, but if you can find it for cheap, it's just kind of a cool book. And first appearance of the Sorcerer, so it's just a neat book jump, and the Jack Kirby art's awesome. So it's something to keep an eye out for. It's kind of what all these are. They're kind of just more just for information. I'm not saying go out and buy these books. It's just kind of something that I find kind of neat, and I like to point out. I think the prototype's kind of cool. And again, it's way cheaper than Strange Tales 110 would be at a 7.5 or at any grade. Raw. I mean, you can't find a $100 raw copy of Strange Tales 110 that's complete attached and all that. So to be able to find that for the Journey Mystery is just kind of neat. And so moving on to Tales Spence number 31. First appearance of the Monster in the Iron Mask. Now, if you look at him, obviously, he's got the Doom mask on. This is kind of a stretch, because that's the only resemblance the two of them bear is in the visuals of the mask. That's really it. Other than that, he's not Dr. Doom in any way. But this would come out in July of 1962, done by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. Famously in Fantastic Four, number 5 would come out in July of 62. I believe they're a couple weeks apart, or around the same time. But they both came out in July of 62, and they were both done by Stan Lee and Jack Kirby. So they're made at probably very similar times, and you can see the carryover of the mask. But Fantastic Four number 5 is one of the most expensive Marvel villain first appearances I could think of, other than Red Skull and stuff like that. But FF5, it's an extremely iconic book. It's a blue chip key. It's something you don't see every day. Now, Tales Spence 31, you don't really see every day either. But I've seen more of those. I don't know. I've seen a couple of both of them, but they don't really. Neither of them come very often in person at shows and at stores and stuff like that. But a raw copy, as seeming, and basically same, low to mid grade copies, seen laying around $200 to $500 on recent solds. So, and of course, the most common CGC census count is at a 5.0, and the GPA. I forget GPA, some analysis, grade 4 analysis or something like that. I'll put it up here. But that's what I use to look at slab sales and stuff like that. Lands it at 5.0 at $600. Now again, this is one of those books where everybody loves Dr. Doom. Dr. Doom's one of the biggest comic book villains of all time. He's massive. So the thing with Dr. Doom is you really can't afford an FF5. So a lot of guys do kind of look at this book, and even though it's really not a prototype, because they're not similar characters at all, I think a lot of guys kind of pull to this book. And I think it's one of the weaker ones, in my opinion. I think it's still a cool book, and I wouldn't mind picking it up myself if I could get it relatively cheap. But I think it's a neat book. I don't think it's anything worth investing $600 or more into. But to each your own. To each your own. And again, it's a tough find anyway. So, and I always recommend looking at your local stores and going to your comic shows and stuff like that before you go on eBay and buy some of these books, because you might be able to find it around, and sometimes cheaper than eBay. And then, all right, so moving on to the fourth book I have here, Pop Gun #2. Now, this is a modern one. This is, the story, I believe, is called Two Copper Pieces. And, it's basically Skull Kickers. Skull Kickers, I might see me talk about some other videos. Skull Kickers is it's a pretty cool series, and I believe it's optioned for like an Amazon show or some sort of animated show, I believe. And so I don't know where they are on the actual show itself, but I know it was optioned at some point. Now, Pop Gun #2 came out in July of 2008. And this has the same team. Zim Zub and Chris Terrace are the two people that worked on both Pop Gun #2, with that story, the Two Copper Pipe story, and Soul Kickers #1, which come out in September of 2010. So July of 2008 to September of 2010, you can see where Two Copper Pipe Pieces turns into Skull Kickers. It's a cool book. It's nothing that I really recommend hunting graded copies on or going on eBay looking for, because the thing is, like, on eBay, guys are probably gonna know what it is if they're putting it on eBay. Like if they pulled it to like sell. This is the kind of book you want to look at, and there's 50 cent, there's dollar bins. Maybe some stores or some resellers will overlook this book not knowing what it is. Otherwise, if if I wasn't into the prototypes, I probably wouldn't know about this either. And I like the Skull Kickers, and I think it's kind of a neat thing. And I still find Skull Kickers 1s in dollar bins. So if guys aren't pulling the actual first appearance of the Skull Kickers, I can't imagine they would also be pulling the prototype. So it doesn't go for all that much. I think it's just kind of neat. It's one of those things where when we get around to that, if that Skull Kicker show ever comes out, it might be something that comes up on your hot 10 list, and maybe you capitalize on pick it up for $1, or it's just a neat thing for your personal collection. Either way, I think it's just kind of neat. And moving on to the last book today, we're only doing 5 today. I might, and again, if this video does it gets good reviews in the comments, and you guys tell me you're excited about stuff like this, I might revisit this, and I could probably crank out 2 or 3 more videos about these prototypes. So if you want to see more prototype characters, let me know in the comments below. And we'll move on to our last one here. Number 5, Sergeant Rock. Sergeant Rock is a very, very famous war character in the comics. Excuse the fly. And of course, Sergeant Rock is known to be an Army at War, which would turn into his own solo title, basically. Army at War number 81 has a story titled The Rock of East Company. Now, this would be written and drawn by Bob Haney, and I believe it's Jerry Gennady. Gennady, I think is how you pronounce it. Again, I'm horrible with last names. But that will come out in April of 54. In May of 54, the next month, Army of War 82 will come out, and you get the first cameo of Sergeant Rock. Now, the character in Rock of EC Company is not Sergeant Rock. They're not the same character. They, the stories don't connect in any way, but there is a guy named Rock who's, I don't know if he's a sergeant or whatever, but he's a member of the Army. And then in our Army at War 83, the following month, in June, you get the first full appearance of Sergeant Rock, but we would switch up writers here. So it's interesting to see that, like, the artist stayed through all 3 issues, 81, 82, and 83. 81 being the prototype, 82 being the cameo, and 83 being the first full appearance. But the writer would stay the same from 81 to 82 and would change to 83, where you get the first full appearance, and all of a sudden, Robert Canister is working on the book. So, or Kanger, I believe, is working on the book. So it's kind of interesting to see, like, who is the creator of Sergeant Rock. I mean, I guess you would argue maybe are they both co-creators. I don't know. But it's a weird book. And all these Army at Wars are expensive. All 3 of these books are kind of just tough to find. It's early to mid 50s war books. A lot of these got wrecked. A lot of these got thrown away. A lot of these got read. Well loved. So, war books were huge at the time. War books were comic books at the time. That was, everything. So, if you look at the 81, the most common graded copy is a 3.5, which sells on according to GPA for about $450. Am I saying go out and buy a 3.5, $450? No. That's, not at least that more than $100 a point, which is, I think, where that book probably should be, but maybe that's a little bit unfair for the age. But I think at a low grade copy, I think over $100 a point seems pretty high. If it was $350, I probably would be super surprised. I still personally wouldn't pay $350 for a 3.5. I'd rather just have a raw copy and roll my dice of trying to get one for less than $100 if you can get lucky. But that's the thing. It's a thing to get lucky. Does it go for over $100 raw? Yeah, it does. But it's one of those things where sometimes a lot of older dealers might just think to pull the 82 and the 83, or just regular dealers. Dealers might just think to pull the 82 and 83. If you're lucky, they don't, and you can find all 3 issues. That'd be great. But most of the war books, although they may be tough, the 9 keys aren't really worth anything. A lot of the guys who collect that have finished out their runs at this point, or are realistically dying off. So, or getting out of collections, or retiring, or whatever it may be. A lot of the guys that are into the war books tend to be the older crowd. So, the thing is, where does the 81 sustain? I don't really know. I mean, I think Sergeant Rock will always be a character that's talked about in some sense, but I don't think he'll ever really hold an ongoing title again like he did, back in the 50s, and through, I think he actually went to the 60s and beyond. So, through Army at War, and then became Sergeant Rock and all that. But I think, 82 and 83 will always be, relatively big books. Same thing like First Unknown Soldier and Star Spangled War Stories. That'll always be, a decent book. But, sometimes you get lucky. Like, I just saw a First Unknown Soldier for, I think, $50. Not that, last weekend. So, it's not an impossible book to find. And, I don't know. I just think it's one of those things where, you're better off just trying to get lucky at, maybe some guy has a run of war books at the flea market or at a convention or, at a store or whatever it may be. And you're thumbing through, maybe they're 2 for $5, maybe they're $10, maybe whatever, maybe they're $20. And you find that 81, hopefully the 82 or that 83, and you really have a hell of a find. So, just something to keep in the back of your mind. It's just cool stuff. I've always liked Sergeant Rock. He's got some cool stories. Although I will say my favorite war stories, because I'm a horror sci-fi guy. I always love the Creature Commandos and the weird war stories and stuff like that. And of course now all that's all hot, because they're doing the Creature Commandos movie and stuff, like the animated movie, and they're going to come into live action through the James Gunn DCU and Safford. So it's maybe some of that war stuff gets a small resurgence, but I don't think so. I think, Sergeant Rock just kind of is what he is. He's an important pillar character for that era of DC Comics. I think sort of comics in general. He's a big character at the time. But, is he, worth hunting down and spending, hundreds or thousands of dollars for an 82 or an 83 or, maybe an 81? To each your own. It kind of depends on what you like and what you're into. Me personally, probably not, but it's still a book I would love to own, and I just kind of hoping to get lucky one of these days. But enough of me rambling. I hope you all enjoyed. If you're not already, follow me here on Facebook and Instagram for more daily content. I post stuff on here every day. I got multiple shorts coming up a day. I got 2 to 3 shorts I try to put up. Sometimes I lapse a day or two, but for the most part, I got the Connors Comics news, where I just talk about new rumors and announcements and leaks and stuff like that. New comics coming out, and a little bit of everything. Sometimes I talk about theories on, quick minute theories. I have a couple videos I did where I did 1 minute pitches on some ideas I've been kicking around. So stuff like that. You keep an eye out on the shorts page. I got 1 or 2 videos coming a week. Every Wednesday I drop on Connors Comics YouTube page, and I try to drop on Sundays as well. I believe this is coming out on a Sunday. So make sure you keep an eye out for those. And on Facebook and Instagram, I'm posting throughout the week, all kinds of stuff on Instagram. I've got a Tales of the Hunt series where, I'll do the whole videos, and then I talk about some of the stuff maybe I didn't buy, maybe some of the people I ran into, some stories about the actual trip, instead of the whole videos are more focused on the actual books that I bought. So, keep an eye out for that. And, I post other stuff. I post, flipping through books, cool keys, questions. Sometimes I ask you guys what you think about certain books and certain things in the community. So make sure you follow me there on both those platforms. And the group Fandoms Unleashed, where we talk about, you get a little inside scoop on Connors Comics, you get a behind-the-scenes look, and we talk about all kinds of stuff, comic books, movies, video games, toys, whatever. You go in there, post yourself, and it's just kind of a good time. So all that's linked down in the description below, and until next time, peace.